And the SEC Insider Hit this morning brought to you by Ace Bolt and Screw, powered by DeWalt Tools, locations in downtown Jackson, Tupelo, and Atlanta. New location coming to Gluckstadt, Mississippi. Ace Bolt and Screw, powered by DeWalt Tools. We welcome in Steve Robertson, genespage.com, part of the 247 Network, Hail State Insider, and Steve joins us on the Miller Lite guest line. Hey, Steve, explain to us what all they're doing, the MSU football team players on the field, and how many, if all of the coaches can monitor it throughout July.
Well, part of July is going to be with the football. Right now they can't have a football out there during drills while coaches are present, and they can do some things on their own. But as far as, the structured protocol for these workouts, that's still led by Tyson Brown and the strength and conditioning staff. And the coaches, cannot really encourage or anything like that. They can't lead or coach. They can be out there just kind of in an observer's role. But the bottom line is that they're kind of ramping things up to get these guys back into football shape before they kind of introduce some, coach-led football drills.
Man, that is amazing that we had March, April, and May and June, and the NCAA couldn't, or maybe the schools didn't feel comfortable with it. I don't know, but I would have thought that they could have done some quote-unquote coaching on the field in July, Steve.
Yeah, well, they will here in about another week. They'll have an opportunity, for coaches to introduce the ball. Of course, no, pads or hitting or anything like that. And again, that's all part of this whole process to kind of ramp up into fall camp. But, we talked a little bit last week, about fall camp's supposed to start on or around August 6th. It's around 25 days before your home opener. And the concern that I have is that the season's going to be pushed back, a couple weeks, 3 weeks, maybe a month. Well, then what does that do for your workout schedule? Well, do you begin fall camp then and then kind of wear the guys out over the course of a couple months' time, or do you kind of continue with these walkthroughs in shells and helmets and that sort of stuff to kind of get them up and get them acclimated before we go? Because I think there's a lot of decisions left to be made about this, and I think that could impact kind of how we practice in the month of August.
So, but on their own, away from what you just described, KJ Costello and Javonte Payton and Osiris Mitchell and Malik Heath are allowed to throw the football around on their own doing. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's got to be player-led. I mean, it can't be one of those deals where Mike Leach says, hey, KJ, I need you to go out here and do this. That's not how it works. I mean, so like if the players themselves want to get together and kind of throw the ball around and some of the players get together to work on their footwork. And, there's a lot of that happens throughout the year anyway, kind of outside of practice. Some of the veteran guys will kind of get those younger guys up to speed and kind of prepare them for the SEC. But, it can't be, coach-led or coach-motivated or even coach-directed. It's got to be completely of the players' own volition.
All right. If you had to guess today who has take KJ Costello out because he will have a significant impact. We'll go a combination of JUCOs and then, Power 5 transfers. Who has the biggest impact? Is it Malik Heath? Is it Jordan Davis? Is it Lashley? Is it Shavers? What direction do you go, Steve?
Well, I want to go with those first two guys right out of the gate. I think, Malik Heath is a guy that was an Under Armour All-American, as was Jordan Davis, right out of high school. And, very highly recruited players. And, Malik Heath, a former Mississippi State signee, but he had offers from just about everybody in the SEC. And the same thing for Jordan Davis, an Alabama signee, but he was recruited by everybody. And this is a guy that's originally from Byhalia, but kind of came to prominence in Memphis. But I think both of those guys, not just because of their ability, but because of the fact they're at positions of need. And so as a result, they're going to be called on a lot more. They're going to get a lot more snaps than perhaps maybe some other players will because, number one, they're very talented. But Mississippi State needs those guys, to really flash forward this year and do a good job. Now, there's going to be some other guys, obviously, they're kind of working their way. I think Trey Lawson's got a bit of a sleeper. I think he's kind of a dark horse guy. It's a pass rusher. I could see him being a guy on third down and make some big things happen. But there's a lot of guys out there, I think, that have the potential to make some plays. And one of the best things about it is for some of these guys that have been around a while is, it's a new broom sweeps clean. You get your Coach Leach and those guys coming in basically with a clean slate, and there are some guys out there that may have the potential to kind of play their way into a more prominent role with a new coaching staff.
Steve Robertson on the Miller Lite guest line. You're listening Out of Bounds on ESPN 105.9 The Zone. It's funny, lost in the shuffle is Garrett Schrader. And, it will be interesting to see what plays out with him, Steve. I thought he had a much better year than people gave him credit for, considering what was going when you're thrown. He and John Rice Plumlee were both just thrown to the wolves as true freshmen with not a lot around them. But aren't you curious to see what this looks like for him this fall as far as what his role will be?
Well, I think there are a lot of Mississippi State fans out there that kind of have the wrong idea about Garrett Schrader. I think some people see him as Nick Fitzgerald 2.0, and I don't mean that in a derogatory sense. But he is a better passer out of high school than Nick Fitzgerald was. If you go back and look at his high school film, they threw the ball around a lot, but he happened to be a true dual-threat guy, and so when things broke down, he could make plays with his feet. Go back and look at some of that early film of him, and he threw an absolute dime to Cyrus Mitchell that he dropped in the sun, if you recall. I mean, he is capable of running this offense. That's one of the things I think some people don't fully appreciate. They think, well, because he had to run so much last year, which is really kind of a byproduct of the play calling, in situations of that nature, and personnel, the fact the wide receivers were just not where they needed to be. So he kind of ran out of necessity last year. But this is a guy that is capable of running the offense. Now, he was a freshman last year, and you make a good point. He's thrown to the wolves last year. This is a guy, the plan was to bring him in, redshirt him, let him get over that labrum tear. He had labrum surgery, in the offseason prior to his senior year. Give him a full year to get a bigger and stronger and get a good feel of the offense. Well, then what happens is, Keaton Thompson loses the competition and leaves, and the best available guy to be the backup was Schrader. And so even when KT comes back, and that was one of the things I interviewed some players about KT entering the portal for the new book, and that's one of the things they said. There were a lot of people that said, hey, it would not have been fair to Garrett Schrader, who worked and competed for the starting job, for KT Thompson to be given the backup quarterback spot when he returned. He needed to go back and earn that. And you know what? He never did. Schrader held him off.
Interesting. I agree with you on Schrader. People selling him short as far as what he can do. And I thought, all things considered, he played really well last year. Out of Bounds, ESPN 105.9 The Zone. He is Steve Robertson, Hail State insider, joining us on the Miller Lite guest line. All right, so have they set a date for practice yet? Like official practice, Steve?
Well, yeah. I mean, not for Mississippi State, but August 6th is supposed to be the day that for everybody to be cleared to get started. But again, that's kind of based on the season starting on time. And at this point, I don't know that anybody can honestly say they expect that to happen. I feel pretty confident that they're going to bang some of these non-conference games. I don't know if you saw this morning, Governor of New Mexico has come out encouraging New Mexico State not to play fall sports. I don't know how well that goes over or if they follow through with that or not, but there's a good chance that game's not going to happen. I could probably get comfortable with the fact that we're probably going to see 2, 3, maybe even the first month of the season pushed back. There's a lot of talk behind the scenes in the industry, Bo, of an 8+1 schedule, meaning 8 SEC games and 1 non-conference game, maybe as much as a 10-game schedule. But I think expecting a 12-game regular season schedule right now is probably a little bit short-sighted. That said, a lot of talk among the bowl people. They expect to have bowl games this year regardless of the season.
Ooh. All right. So you're hearing that the bowl games are letting the, I guess, Power 5 conferences know that they want to do everything, exhaust everything that they can to make sure that they have these games in December and January?
Absolutely. And that, the phrase you use there is they're willing to do whatever they can to assist in any way whatsoever because, listen, these bowls exist for one day a year. And one of the things that a lot of people said, well, ticket sales are probably down. And that's true. But if somebody explained to me yesterday college football TV ratings are going to be higher than at any point in our history this year. Advertising rates, as a result, are going to drive up. So some of the money that they would lose in actual ticket revenue, they'll make up for in ad revenue. And listen, nobody's going to get rich on college football this year. It's just not going to happen. Everybody's going to take a little bit of a deficit. But these bowl people need these games to be played. It is the reason that they exist. And I understand they are a willing partner in college football and will do whatever they have to do to ensure that there is a bowl experience for these teams.
Wow. And ESPN bundles all that, and they need that inventory and content. And then the sports betting piece, I hope that happens. Steve Robertson on the Out of Bounds show. What about let's switch gears to the USA Today numbers, 2018, 2019 financial numbers. You posted, or someone on genespage.com posted, the fact that Mississippi State was around $112 million in expenditures and maybe netted out $12 to $13 million as far as a profit. And it was the fourth straight year, Steve. Make sure I have this right. Was it the fourth straight year where they made over $10 million?
Yeah, here's the thing too. You got to take some of those numbers with a little bit of grain of salt. But yeah, I mean, State's in very good financial shape right now, and I think the big thing here is I think a lot of people read that and they say, hey, well, you get this surplus. Well, it's not really a surplus. Mississippi State's about to spend $50 million to renovate Humphrey Coliseum. And so that's one of the reasons, if you'll look at that chart, you've seen some things kind of ramp up under John Cohen. It's because of the fact that they're getting ready to kind of build their reserves to renovate Humphrey Coliseum and kind of modernize an arena that it's really gotten antiquated in recent years. And so it's not a situation where, hey, we need to invest more money in football, or why are we saving all this money? There's a method to the madness. And so they've done a good job being good stewards of the money, and want to go out there and do a good job, because you have to have world-class facilities in this conference. You can't just go build an arena and say, okay, all right, that's done. And that's the thing about Duty Noble. For years and years, Mississippi State fans kind of rested on the mystique of the left field lounge, and we allowed that old girl to get age on her. And now you look at it, you've got a great facility, and I think that's you'll see something similar with the Humphrey Coliseum. It's going to be, they're going to basically gut the inside and renovate that entire facility, and trust me, it'll be great. I mean, when people think about Duty Noble, they'll do something similar with Humphrey Coliseum. They'll do a great job with that.
Ooh, that's long overdue, isn't it?
There's no doubt.
Do you know when they're the pandemic, COVID may have pushed this back? Do you know when they expect to start that project?
Yeah, the talk was they were hoping to start after the season, and that's one of the things you think about now with all that's gone on in the past 4 months. What does that do for the time frame from all that? What does that do for the donorship for those projects? And so I think they're probably in wait and see mode, but this is going to go forward at some point. It might be pushed back a little bit, but this is a project that needs to happen. It's been something that's been in the works for a long time, and building a new arena would be an astronomical expense. So this is probably the better way to go, and you can kind of preserve some of the cool things about the Hump, but the concourse, the seating area, there's so much of that is kind of very 1970-ish. We've got to kind of get into the modern era with that arena.
Steve Robertson on the Out of Bounds show. Let's talk recruiting. Leach and MSU football, I think on your site, somewhere around 49th or 51st in recruiting. Now, I understand he didn't even get hired till after the bowl game. I think Brad Peterson and the crew kind of whipped him around the state. He did try to almost hit every county in January. February, I guess, is kind of a weird time before the pandemic, and then everything's been shut down since about March 10th. So having said that, I'm not here to throw the staff under the bus. Where do they sit with you? Did you think that they would still be in the top 40 or top 30? Or are they sitting about where you thought they would be, considering they didn't really get there till mid-January and everything shut down in early March?
Well, yeah, they're a little bit behind where I expected them to be, but some of that, too, is because of the fact that you lose the spring evaluation period, for all of us, not just coaches, but for those of us to go out and evaluate players. And, You don't have the Nike camps to get some objective third-party measurables about players. And so as a result, I said this on Gene Spade yesterday, the rankings this year are probably the worst ones we've had, in a decade or more. And that's not to be critical of the network in any stretch. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm suggesting is there's less information out there about players for this recruiting cycle than there has been in a long time. So there's a lot of guesswork going on. But Mississippi State's about to go on a pretty good recruiting run. There's a couple of receivers out there, and that's one of the things we had talked about on your show a while back is, State was kind of treading water there for a while, and they were, in the top 5 or 6 for a handful of big-time receivers. They needed some receivers to pop. Well, they got Teddy Knox in, and now we expect, Dwayne Lofton out of Fort Worth, Texas, and then Malik Neighbors out of Louisiana. Those are 2 big-time guys we expect to join the class sooner rather than later. And I think that's when you'll see State kind of begin to, kind of get back where you think they should be. I think they're a little bit behind, but certainly they've got time to make up for lost ground.
Okay. So do you think that they can put together a top 30 class?
Yeah, I think so. And it's going to be a little more difficult this year because there's not the star power in the state of Mississippi that there ordinarily is. As a matter of fact, I think there are even some kids that are rated high in this class are a little bit overrated. I think sometimes they give us those stars because typically you have half a dozen kids in Mississippi to get 4 stars, so let's give those kids 4 stars. I think this is just a weird class because of the circumstances around it all. I mean, kids hadn't been able to get out and go to summer camps. They haven't had a chance to get out and go work in these independent combines very often, and so there's just a lot of information out there that we ordinarily have available to us that is not available. And so as these guys get on the field and senior film makes the rounds, I think you'll see the rankings kind of tighten up a little bit, but it's not a huge year in state this year. Next year looks to be a really good one. But this year, one of the thinnest years in state in my career.
Wow. Okay. Steve Robertson on the Out of Bounds show. The Blakey Blakester's got a question.
Yeah, Steve, obviously the big knock against Mullen was not recruiting receivers or not recruiting the right receivers. And it would be naive to think that Mike Leach won't get receiver talent because that's what he runs. But is there any concern that there's going to be the pendulum will swing too far, that Leach and his staff will be so offensive heavy that the kind of typical Mississippi State defensive talent that fans and the Bulldogs are used to getting won't be quite as readily available?
That's a great question. I think it's a fair question, too, because that's one of the things I'll give Dan Mullen a lot of credit for, is Dan Mullen believes in recruiting defense. He was such an offensive-minded guy. I think he felt like, you know what, you give me 11 kids out here and a quarterback that can run the zone read, I'll win you some ball games. I'll get you to a ball game. But in order for us to get the football back, we're going to have to be dominant on defense. Now, he also coached at a time when Mississippi was really producing big-time defensive players on the regular. And so, yeah, he emphasized defense, made sure sometimes he put his best athletes on defense, where, historically Leach has kind of put his best athletes on offense. So I think that is a concern. And one of the things that I'll mention, too, about the wide receiver recruiting, I think, a lot of it boils down to this. Dan Mullen, by and large, despite the fact that he runs a spread offense, he is a Big Ten power running coach. That's what he wants to do. He wants to spread you out and then beat you to death with a quarterback that is capable of beating you with an arm when you bring his safeties up. Mike Leach, completely different format. And so Mike Leach is going to attract a better quality receiver at Mississippi State than Dan Mullen did, because primarily his focus is to throw the football. Dan Mullen's focus was to run the football. And that's not to say that we didn't have some good receivers coming through, but I believe we're about to go to a bit of a renaissance period when it comes to receivers, because you just think about it right now. You get Malik Neighbors and Dwayne Knox, Brandon Buckhalter, and Teddy Knox. That's probably a better collection of receivers than Dan Mullen ever recruited at Mississippi State. Mike Leach hadn't even coached his first game here.
Dang. And how many do you think they'll take? Wide receivers. How many do you think that they'll take?
Well, the need was 5. And then you get Terrell Shavers as the grad transfer, and I don't think anybody really expected that to happen. So now I think that 5th receiver spot is a little bit iffy. I think you just kind of wait. You get into fall camp and kind of evaluate what you have and see if you've got some guys that can play. And there may be 1 or 2 guys that you look at and say, you know what, these guys don't fit the scheme. Let's put them on defense. And then you have to go get that 5th receiver. But I think you've got to get at least 100% got to get 4, possibly 5. But I think that fifth receiver spot is probably somewhat iffy right now. We'll just kind of see how things progress.
Okay, give me a sleeper at the wide receiver position for this year. Take out Malik Heath, Osiris Mitchell, Javonte Payton, even Shavers. Give me a guy who could emerge as a solid to good player.
Well, one of the guys that I absolutely loved out of Knoxville County was Keziah Pruitt. Problem was, his senior year, he just couldn't stay healthy. And this is a guy last year they allowed him to redshirt and kind of get healthy and kind of get up to speed, physically. But I believe he is a guy in the slot that could be, I don't know if I'd call him a difference maker, but I expect him to be a real contributor this year. And that's a name that a lot of people hadn't really thought about in a while. But this is an incredibly competitive kid that has worked really hard to get where he is. And this kid's in Knoxville County. And Coach Shorter was there, and early on back before that, there's a tradition there of hard work, dedication, and kind of playing with a chip on your shoulder. So he'll bring that with him when he comes, and I think he's a guy that could flourish in this scheme because he's always been able to get open. The bigger issue is can he stay healthy? If that kid can stay healthy, I think he can be a real contributor this year.
We'll leave it there. Steve Robertson. GenesPage.com, 247 Network on the Out of Bounds Show, ESPN 105.9 The Zone, and the Miller Lite guest line. Thanks, Steve. Appreciate it.
Take care, brother.
And that was Steve Robertson. You can watch the interview YouTube Live. Search Out of Bounds Sports. Bo Bounds, the Blakey Blakester, ESPN 105.9 The Zone. Interesting. Pruitt could be the sleeper there.
Yeah, you're going to get opportunities.
No doubt.
Even if
as Steve Spurrier Jr. told us on this show, there's no doubt they have the utmost confidence in themselves
to get kids ready to play.
And Leach and KJ Costello that they're going to be able to sling it and do it in an efficient manner, which hasn't been done. Dan had some of those seasons, but Moorhead never had. Never in the 2 years, it was discombobulated, and it just didn't look good.
No, and even Dan's best passing teams aren't going to be what Mike Leach's passing teams are. So it's going to be, conservatively, if you throw 40 times a game, which will be low on the low end, it'll be over 50. But that's 400 passes. Somebody's got to catch them.
50-plus times a game.
Yeah.
At times.
Yeah. If you go 10-game season this year, 500 passes.
KJ Costello, first-round pick in the NFL.
You need somebody to catch it for him.
The Out of Bounds Show, ESPN 105.9 The Zone, driven by the Continental Tires and 49 Tire in Richland, Mississippi. They have a valet service. They'll come pick up your vehicle, service it, put tires on it, and drop it back by your home or office. 49 Tire in Richland, Mississippi. And don't forget, Chris Corley with Angel Oak Home Loans. Chris Corley, Angel Oak Home Loans, as you're refinancing your home or condo.